Is the EU's large-scale rejection of Chinese goods through robot pre-screening really about targeting China? Here is Jersey's news commentary channel. Recently, a major piece of news spread rapidly across China's foreign trade circle. After the EU activated its so-called robot review system, a large volume of Chinese goods was reportedly stopped at airports, seaports, and terminals. Some foreign trade companies even claimed that 15% to 20% of their shipments were rejected by the system. Many people's first reaction was the EU is once again going after China. But from an objective and rational perspective, this interpretation is a typical persecution complex mentality. In my view, there is nothing malicious about this at all. What we are seeing is clearly a technological upgrade in EU customs governance. What the EU is now fully implementing is ICS-2 Import Control System 2. Its essence is not that robots are replacing humans, but that all goods entering the EU must submit a complete entry summary declaration (ENS) before departure, after which the system automatically conducts security and compliance risk analysis. The EU has made this very clear: all cargo must undergo pre-arrival risk analysis, and the system will apply more precise controls to high-risk shipments. In plain terms, it is not checking whether the goods are Chinese. It is checking whether your HS code, shipper information, consignee information, cargo description, product risk category, and historical anomaly records are complete, accurate, and verifiable. If the data is incomplete, the system may directly request supplementary documentation. In serious cases, it may even issue a DNL do not load order before the goods are loaded onto an aircraft or vessel. So what many Chinese exporters are facing today is not political suppression, but rather the collision between old practices long dependent on experience, personal connections, and vague declarations and a new impersonal digital rule system. This is the real core conflict. What is particularly telling is that many companies' first reaction is not to study the new rules, but to immediately activate the very Chinese-style Guanxi PR route, calling freight forwarders, customs brokers, and local connections to see whether the shipment can be changed into manual review and release. But the defining feature of ICS-2 is precisely that it pushes forward and compresses human discretionary power. The EU has specifically emphasized that the system performs risk analysis based on ENS data during the preloading stage. If the information is inaccurate, customs may directly reject the ENS or issue a mandatory request for additional information. This means that many of the gray areas that previously relied on knowing the right person, favors, and relationship-based lobbying are disappearing rapidly. That is why some companies still get rejected even after their goods have already arrived at airports or ports and are waiting to be loaded into containers. The real issue is not that the relationship work was insufficient, but rather one of two things: either the declaration description is non-standard, or the product itself has compliance problems. If it is the former, the fix is usually not complicated. For example, the cargo description may be too vague, the HS code too broad, shipper and consignee information incomplete, or hazardous attributes inaccurately described. Any of these can cause the system to reject the filing. The EU recently updated official guidance specifically stressing that ENS declarations must provide precise and comprehensive data. The real trouble lies in the second scenario. If the product is fundamentally non-compliant whether in quality standards, certification, ingredients, or safety properties, and the exporter still hopes to use the old "find someone to smooth it over" approach, then this time they may indeed have hit a real wall. This also explains why some cargo is piling up at airports and ports, while Chinese public discourse remains broadly silent, because many companies themselves understand that the problem may not lie with the EU at all, but with their own long-standing opportunistic habits. Of course, in the comment sections there are familiar voices saying the EU is blocking China again, and China should retaliate symmetrically. This kind of nationalistic emotional reflex has already become pathological. But viewed rationally, this kind of automated risk review is actually a major step forward in modern customs governance. First, it dramatically improves efficiency. Low-risk cargo can clear customs faster, while high-risk cargo is identified earlier, reducing downstream congestion. The EU explicitly states that ICS-2 is designed not only to strengthen security, but also to facilitate the legitimate flow of goods. Second, it effectively reduces the risk of relationship-based corruption. Historically, the most corruption-prone areas in customs clearance have always been those gray spaces involving human release decisions, rent-seeking through connections, and selective enforcement. In this respect, corruption in Chinese customs has been especially persistent. One batch is arrested, and another soon emerges. Like weeds, it never truly disappears. Now, with machines conducting the first layer of screening, much of the room for judging people rather than rules has been sharply compressed. So to simply frame this as the EU targeting China is really just an over-politicized, nationalist emotional response. What is truly worth worrying about is another very Chinese-style reaction. Instead of studying the rules, people study how to game the system. I can almost guarantee that in the near future, China will quickly produce a whole industry of so-called ICS-2 response experts, smart cargo description templates, and AI customs optimization services. These services will specialize in studying the EU system's keyword logic, risk triggers, stop words, and high-sensitivity fields, turning compliance into yet another loophole-hunting business. The EU has even recently updated its stop words rule library, which itself shows that the system is continuously evolving. As a result, the future will likely split into two very different paths. One group of companies will genuinely improve product quality and declaration standards, successfully adapting to the new rules. Another group will continue using opportunistic thinking to study how to fool the AI. The former will survive. The latter will eventually be shut out again. So is this EU robot pre-screening malicious? My answer is crystal clear, absolutely not. It is the modernization of rules. The real problem is not that the EU has become too strict, but that some companies have become too accustomed to surviving in ambiguity. When a system that has long depended on relationship networks suddenly encounters a highly standardized, automated, low-discretion framework, the thing least able to adapt is never the cargo itself. It is the mindset behind it. The deepest lesson here is not that the EU is blocking China again, but rather this: once rules no longer leave a door open for opportunism, how much longer can China's grey customs clearance culture survive?